morning, everyone. I'm Mon from RxPx. It's good to be here at this session. We all know that AI is here to stay. You heard from Arthur Alston. He's an innovator and an early adopter. So I would like to take a few seconds to ask the audience in the room, don't think too much into it, but just take a second, think about where you are at the moment. When you look at the adoption curve with AI and digital, there are innovators, that's like 2.5% of the population. There are early adopters, that's about 13% of the population. You've got the early to late, 30% each, and then the laggards, that's 16%. So, show of hands, innovators in the room. Don't think too much about it. Be brave, bold, raise it up. Great, fantastic. Not that many. What about early adopters? Good to see. Early stage of considering, late stage. Laggards, because you don't have that support at your company. No? All right, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that. That gives us a feel of who's who in the room. During this 20-minute session, we're going to cover, some of the challenges that pharma is facing. We're going to talk about the speed of adoption, the infrastructure support that you have, the integration, and things like that. And we're going to showcase real-world examples. So we look forward to sharing that with you. We've got Mike Barnett in the room, who's a clinician. I've got Peta as well. I'll hand over to them in a minute to introduce themselves. But maybe we'll start off with Mike. Quick intro and a little bit about Snack, and where do you see AI impacting healthcare?
Great, thanks very much, Mon. So Michael Barnett, I'm a neurologist, an MS neurologist. I run a large MS service at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, and I run a computational imaging group at the University of Sydney, where I'm a professor of neurology. I wear another hat, which Mon has referred to. It's SNAC. SNAC is Sydney Neuroimaging Analysis Centre, which provides services to pharma for clinical trials as a central reading site for clinical trials. And in the last few years, we've delved into AI and have produced a number of TGA and FDA-approved products that automatically quantitate imaging metrics, primarily in a clinical setting for monitoring neurological disease. Those products use AI, which is the topic of today's conversation, and I suppose, for me as a clinician, AI has become pretty much all-pervasive. I was really pleased to see there are very few laggards in the audience, which surprised me because traditionally, pharma has lagged behind the clinical world and even further behind the research world, and I come from the former two. And in those spheres, we use AI. Probably I would use it 4 or 5 times a day, and that ranges from everything in my clinical work from office automation, dictation, scanning documents and reading through them and summarising them for me, all the way through to clinical decision support. And that clinical decision support might be a large language model, or it might be an AI tool that automatically segments new MS lesions on a scan that I would otherwise be unable to see. So across all of these spheres we're using it, and then obviously in my interaction with pharma, SNAC is now providing AI-based solutions for monitoring risks of therapies, whether they be risks that result in abnormal blood work or risks that result in abnormal imaging. We have ways of doing that, not just in the context of clinical trials, but now also in the real world. So I'll stop there and let you, someone else speak.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike, for sharing that. And what about you, Peta? Where are you seeing AI impacting healthcare? I think I would categorize you as an innovator and an early adopter, just seeing, you navigate some of the challenges that we see in pharma. What's your say on that?
Thanks, Mon. I think most of you I mean, there's lots of familiar faces that I've already seen this morning. So my name's Peta McCarthy. I lead medical information currently at Lilly. I have a long history in the patient services space as well. I think from my perspective, the role that I play within the pharma industry is very much oriented towards keeping our patients as safe as we possibly can and ensuring that they are able to use medicines in the most effective way possible, that they have all of the information they need to make informed decisions about their health, and that our clinicians have all of the information they need to make informed prescribing decisions as well. And in an industry where we are pressured for time, where as we evolve into a space where medicines are becoming really complex and have lots of different aspects to them, not just the medicines themselves, but there's diagnostics and monitoring that goes alongside with a lot of medicines these days. Using technology in a way to become more efficient at making sure that we can keep people safe and clinicians and patients informed is where it's at. So that's what I'm focused on. It's about trying to make sure that we can do things as efficiently as possible with the best outcomes.
Thank you, Peter. And I think we might bring that to life a little bit more with the video and image that we're going to show on screen. I'm going to try this. Oh, thank you.
It works by sending a patient's MRI to a server in the cloud. There it's compared to a previous scan, analysed by an algorithm and sent back as colour-coded images, more accurate than the most skilled neuroradiologists.
The green and the blue spots indicate either new or what we call enlarging lesions.
Sarah Ross-Smith was diagnosed with MS 20 years ago. The disease affects her mobility, but she's still able to continue her work as a lawyer.
To know that patients will have an earlier treatment course available to them is really very promising for so many people. And I think my initial response was one of complete excitement.
It's here in the lab engineers take the data from thousands of brain scans to train the artificial intelligence tool. The next step is to take it from here to clinicians around the world. To make that happen, the team has just received a grant to take the product to market.
Thank you. And Mike, you mentioned to me once that you've seen 1 million scans, is that right?
Yeah, look, I mean, I work in MS, and MRI is critical to the monitoring of patients with this disease because a lot of new pathology is subclinical, so it doesn't overtly manifest to either the patient or the clinician. So unless you're monitoring an MRI, you can't really monitor the disease. And we change our therapy. In MS, we now have some 20 or so medications on the market. And so we monitor carefully and change our therapy according to the MRI outcomes. And if you go and have an MRI now, you will have about 1,000 to 2,000 images produced. And you've got to imagine that a radiologist looking at those thousands of images and scrolling through the current scan and then even comparing it to the previous one, it's a very laborious, time-consuming task that is ideally suited to the use and implementation of AI. So yeah, look, at a clinical level, it has an incredibly important role in imaging. But I just also mentioned back to what Peter said, I mean, this is not just about clinical decision support, either through this sort of tool or even large language models acting as co-pilots. But a lot of it is about relieving the administrative burden on physicians. There's a huge amount of burnout in the industry, and if I can have tasks automated for me, if I can have, even product information from a drug. I was at another meeting talking about AI. There were 5 physicians in the room yesterday, and I said, who has read the product information of any drug ever? And none of them had. And I mean, I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it's true. We just do not have time to start reading through reams. So if we can have a tool that we know is accurately, and there's some issues around that, but accurately going to summarise the key points that are important to our practice, particularly when monitoring risk, that is just not just a time saver, but potentially a lifesaver.
Thank you. And we're seeing that across the industry as well. If you do a search on SIG right now, you will see about more than 2,000 jobs that are looking for people with AI skills. And if not, if you read the job description, not that I have so much time to check all of that out, but one of the main requirements is having that experience or knowledge or skill set around data management, data analysis, which is so interesting. And you mentioned, Mike, that you're using tools for, dictating and things like that. And we've seen, like, with this tool with Sarah, she's in a much better position now because of the use of AI in neuroimaging. So with dictation and things like that, what are some of the tools that you're using? Because it's so interesting to hear. And in pharma, there's always, like when we're recording Teams, for example, we get told, okay, no, we can't record this because of this, this, and this. So with patients, like, what tools are you using in those
So the
instances?
commonest tool that's used are these smart dictation tools. And in Australia, many of you will have seen a company called Heidi, just raised, I think, $265 million. So it's skyrocketing, and it's used by almost everyone I know, even the hospital system, which is particularly difficult to implement anything digital or AI-based. It has now got pilots, at least, to implement...
I hate that word, by the way.
to implement Heidi across a number of departments. So I use that every day, and it means it's not word-for-word transcription of what I say, but the next step that I use with patient consent is ambient listening. So it will listen to the consultation and produce not just some notes, but perhaps even a letter back to the referring doctor. The difficulty with that is, of course, it only has access to the information from that consultation. And in chronic neurological disease, we're seeing the patients 10, 15, 20 times. I had my 25th anniversary with a patient the other day because I've been seeing them for so long. Patients with MS, fortunately, they don't die. So they're with you for a long, long time. But it only has access to that consultation. Unless, of course, we can upload all of the patient's previous notes and allow the AI tool, the large language model, to have all of that background information when we do it. Now, that brings into play all of the governance and privacy constraints, and perhaps we're going to have, on-premises AI or private cloud AI to solve all of these problems. But there are a few governance problems to overcome, but certainly in the clinical sphere, this is just becoming... it's dominant in all of our interactions, not just with patients, but also in our implementation of the use of drugs, as we talked about before.
That's excellent. And and I think, Peta, you could probably share as well in terms of how you are using AI within different solutions, when you were in the patient services space, without violating any NDA,
Of course.
but share for learning purposes.
I would echo what Mike says. I think, and across industry, this is not just where I work, this is at several organisations that I've been part of, but also it's part of the vernacular of how we talk with each other these days. Natural language processing models used in processing medical information inquiries. You see machine learning in safety processing. You see AI chatbot models and virtual agents when it comes to patient support initiatives. I think there's a growing number of digital and AI projects, I guess you would call them, across industry that seek to, utilise the vast amount of information. That's the other thing. I think as the digital world grows, the amount of information that we have access to is huge, and it's no longer practical to try and process that level of data manually. So using digital tools and artificial intelligence and machine learning is really the only way to start and make sense of that very rich data source that we have access to.
Yeah, absolutely. And also patient personalization, right, throughout their journey, and sort of addressing those moments that matter and friction throughout their journey as well. What are some of the ways that you've used in that situation?
So I think when patients are able to input, and again, the caveat to this is I think within industry there's always a challenge when it comes to the protection of personal information for patients, and there's privacy considerations. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done behind the scenes to bring the business along for the ride and to ensure that all the right stakeholders are consulted and the right protections and controls are in place. But for patients to be able to have a really customised and personalised experience, so that they're only receiving the information that's relevant to them at the time that they need it, rather than there being a static presentation of information for them.
Excellent. And it takes 9 months to get a human baby out. How long does it take to get a pilot off the ground? Don't let me start. You have lots of experience there.
I do, and I know that pilots can be considered a dirty word, but they're a great way of testing. I get testing the waters, and I think they're also a great way of when you have an organisation that's more conservative in their approach towards digital initiatives. It can be a nice way to, a soft way for them to step into that space, is to run a pilot, and just it gives a business an opportunity to test the controls and the boundaries that they need to have in place in order to do this in a safe and effective way that protects people's data and make sure that the output is accurate. So I think it's a fine line to walk. I think we need to be faster, so we do need to move faster. We're way too slow as an industry.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think, having those guardrails, framework in place is going to help tremendously, and providing that confidence, that it's done in a manner that is in sort of a control environment, because we all know AI iterates and, can scale. So, yeah, and there's a lot of learnings and insights that we get from it, which is fantastic. All right, I'm going to go to the next question. So, Mike, what is the biggest friction? I mean, you touched on this a little bit just now, that you see with clinicians at the moment with adoption of AI.
I think it depends on the setting, private practice versus hospital setting versus research. So these are all different settings. But I suppose there is this background concern about privacy. That's one of the biggest constraints. And then the concern with large language models that are specific are hallucinations, generalizability of the model, etc. So there are solutions to these things. So, with regard to hallucinations of large language models, you'll see that there is now actually a CE-approved large language model for use in medical practice, and that's been created by one of my colleagues who many of you know, Heinz Wendel in Germany, has now got a company that's got a CE-marked large language model, and the way they do this is they constrain the output of the model to validated medical documents. So he's built a repository of documents that's been validated by a consortium of experts that might include Pharma documents, TGA documents, FDA documents, PubMed documents. There's an enormous number of resources, but it means that the output is constrained to that, and that dramatically reduces the likelihood of hallucinations. Generalizability, we can overcome by just using enormous volumes of data, or in a clinical setting, fine-tuning that data. So one of the criticisms of AI is that it has this broad knowledge, but it doesn't have fine expertise in a particular domain. So I wouldn't trust ChatGPT to give me detailed information about what to do with my patient with multiple sclerosis, but I suspect if I fine-tune ChatGPT on all of our patient data, if I was allowed to do that in our MS clinic with 1,500 patients over 25 years, it probably would be extremely good at that, and probably far better than my fellows. And then the privacy constraint, I mean, that is obviously a big issue. A lot of the companies, including Heidi, tell us they now meet all of the Australian privacy regulations. In fact, they meet GDPR regulations. So I think those will be overcome. The use of private clouds, on-premises solutions. I mean, at the moment, an on-premises solution, you need to go and spend a minimum of $25,000 on GPUs to inference models in your own setting. But it's changing every week. I mean, you saw just last week the company that makes the majority of the hardware, NVIDIA, released a little tiny computer called a DGX Spark to do inferencing, and it's tiny. Soon we will be able to do just as much on our phones. So I don't think on-premises solutions are out of the equation either. I think they're the main frictions, but they're all overcomable. And I know time's running out.
10
I just
seconds
make
in.
one last comment,
Yeah,
and
go for
that
it.
is, I totally agree with Peter. You do need some guardrails,
Yeah.
but it needs to be a balance so that by the time the
Exactly.
pilot's finished, you don't want the technology to be completely obsolete and then the pilot's useless.
Yeah. Any last thoughts?
I was going to say human in the loop. I think adoption of AI is often limited by a fear of people losing their jobs, the machines taking over. But I think there's always going to be a need for a human in the loop. There's always going to be a need for, human intervention. I think this just frees us up to do work that matters.
Yeah.
You can't replace humans.
Yes, absolutely.
AI doesn't have empathy. AI doesn't really, at the moment at least, critically reason. We will not be removing humans anytime soon.
Yep.
As far as the workforce goes, is it going to be a recomposition of the workforce, not a deletion of the workforce?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. One last statement from me. Be bold. Let's get rid of pilots. But yeah, that's just me. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, Mon.